And Stephen is very kind to come to us and to talk to us today from hope from a secular worldview. So it's my pleasure, and it's been great to get to know him this morning, to introduce Stephen Woodford. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Why, hello, my fellow apes. I hope you are well. I am Stephen Woodford. I run the YouTube channel Rationality Rules, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I mean it sincerely when I say thank you very much for your time, especially with how many speakers you've had to listen to beforehand. I understand it takes a lot out of you. You must really care about this stuff. Now, there will be a chance for questions after I've spoken, and so if anything I'm about to say sparks your curiosity, or better yet, disagreement, then please keep it in mind. You will have the opportunity to ask your questions at the end. All right, to the topic at hand, hope. That is what we're here to discuss, hope from a religious and non-religious point of view. This means, of course, that we're not here to discuss what's true. We're here to discuss what we hope is true. But did you catch that? Yeah, hope presupposes a possibility of truth. For if there is no possibility, then there is no hope. Hope, then, is wanting something that has the possibility of being true or coming to pass, actually being true or coming to pass. Here's a few examples. We might say that we hope for a certain game for Christmas, or we hope to spend quality time with our friends and family over the weekend, or we might simply hope for a time to fly by so that this dude on stage will stop talking and we can get on with the rest of our day. That's hope for you. Hope is a want for something, event, or state to be or become true. And I think we can all agree that hope is a universal human experience. It doesn't matter who you are or what your background is, hope motivates and inspires you. Hope is the fuel of our fire, in the engine of our dreams. Now, sometimes instances of hope are materialistic, such as the case of wanting a video game, but other times hope is far deeper. The hope to leave the world a better place than we found it is not materialistic. It transcends us. It's a selfless, lifelong pursuit, a goal to benefit those that come after we're long gone. Some hopes, then, are more grand than others, but nearly every example of hope that you can think of is accessible to both atheists and theists, to the religious and non-religious alike. And so let's get one thing clear from the get-go. The idea that the religious or the non-religious have a monopoly over hope is nonsense. Such a view doesn't deserve to be taken seriously, but sadly, it's nonetheless expressed frequently by apologists. They claim that unless something ultimately lasts forever, then all meaning and hope are out of the window. But since we're not here to speak specifically about meaning, I'll get back to hope. There are some instances of hope that only the religious can have, right? For example, Christians and Muslims can hope that we'll see our dead loved ones again in heaven. We've heard much of this today. They hope that humanity will outlive the stars, will live forever. These hopes are not available to the non-believer like me, are they? And so what hope do I, as an atheist, as a naturalist, as the Forsaken, come to offer you? Well, suppose that I can't offer you such hope. Suppose I tell you that eternity is a false promise. Suppose I tell you straight up, with no sugarcoating, that you're not going to live forever. Is that really a problem? Would this be such a candle to your fears, such a grievance to your desires, that you'd hastily reject it out of hand? To delve into this, we need to question why so many want an afterlife. Why does one hope for this to be true? Well, I think there's broadly two reasons. The second reason is more noble, and we'll get to it later. The first reason is more potent, and it's this. We hope for life after death because we fear death after life. When we think about it, a belief in the afterlife is, at bedrock, a denial of death. Death means that your consciousness, you, will one day cease to be. Just as you didn't exist for billions of years before you were born, upon a day you will go back to dust. But religion denies this. They say no. The Christian preacher, for instance, says that if you live your one and only life according to how he interprets the Bible, which, by the way, is completely different to how the church fathers interpreted the Bible, then you will go to heaven. But if you don't follow how he interprets God's words, then no heavenly cupcakes for you. You will die, you will cease to exist at best, and burn in the eternal fires at worst, whereas he will live happily ever after. And the Christian preacher isn't alone here. Many religions deny death, And most religions believe that the gods are not going to judge you by the content of your character. No, they're going to judge you by the conviction of your beliefs. You don't get into heaven by being a good person. Per John 14:6, you get into heaven by saying that Jesus is your king. And when an atheist like me stands on stage and says that you won't survive death because, contrary to popular belief, death means death, what's the reaction? In a nutshell, it's this. What do you mean that the world wasn't created with me in mind? Am I not God's chosen, built in his image, no less? What good is a future if I'm not here to see it? Admittedly, this disposition is often more subtly expressed, and we have heard it here today. But it is, no doubt, the cornerstone of the claim that in order for anything to ultimately mean anything, it has to last forever. Not only is this claim erroneous, it's deeply narcissistic. This arrogance, often disguised as humility, is a disease we call piety. It's a hope for something to be true, ultimately for our own gain. We want heaven because we don't want death. We want to live forever. We want to see our loved ones again in heaven, in an afterlife. We want. Now, I'm sure that many Christians will completely agree with me when I say that for one to desire heaven for one's own gain, even implicitly, is to lean on one's fears rather than their heart. It's an ego trip that's unbefitting for Christianity. But even if we recognize it, it is still the case that many Christians hope heaven exists, in part because of their own selfish desires. And that's okay. It's just a fact. Many of us want to live forever. So that's the first reason we want an afterlife. We want it because it maximizes our well-being. The second, more noble reason we want heaven is because we want justice. And we've heard a lot about justice today. A hope for an afterlife is a cry out for justice. It's a recognition of life being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And it's a desire for this not to be the case. So let's talk about justice and what religion makes of it. First, I think it's important to note that we are not alone in our demand for justice. Other cultures and religions desire it too. Consider Hinduism and many other Eastern religions, which involve a belief in reincarnation. They're convinced that when we die, we will be reborn. And if we're good in this life, we receive a better life in the next. But if we're bad in this life, we receive a worse life in the next round. Now, you might find this view to be silly and obviously false, perhaps, and thus there's no hope of it being true. But for the sake of humility, we need to acknowledge that just as we find monkey gods and reincarnation to be silly in the Western world, the rest of the world finds Christian claims equally obviously silly. They smile at the claim of a god impregnating a virgin, that we can and have inherited the sin of our very distant ancestors. What a barbaric view. And that a god forgave us for these sins that we didn't commit by sacrificing himself to himself. In short, we humans tend to assume that the world shares our view because, in most cases, people in our small world, our small community, share our view. Our parents, our teachers, our community tend to be convinced of the same things as we, and it's because of this that it's so easy for us to forget that the rest of the world has very different views. Now, let's put Hindu justice to the test. As we're aware, there are many evils in the world. For instance, there are many children that have, unfortunately, suffered from a disease or a serious problem such as cancer. In terms of justice, the Hindu, believing in reincarnation, may look at this child and reason that they must have done something bad in their last life in order to have been given this bad life that they're experiencing now. To be clear, the Hindu will help the child, but not for the purpose of justice. Justice, so they believe, has already had its way. We can see then that the Hindu's motivation to fix a problem is halted by their belief that there's nothing to fix. They don't need justice, it's here. They are not motivated to enact justice here on earth because it's already here on earth, it's already served. But what of the Christian? When a child dies from cancer, we're told not to worry because she's now in the hands of God, and so justice has been served. And when we ask why she suffered such a nasty, short life compared to so many others that live long, fruitful lives, we're told it's because she's pure. Her life was a soul-building speedrun due to her being near perfect from Genesis. All the suffering that child went through was worth it because she's now in heaven doing heavenly things forever. Hence, the Christian, like the Hindu, isn't motivated to install justice here on earth because they are convinced that justice will be served once we die. Again, we see motivation to improve Earth thrown aside. There's no need to fix today because God will fix tomorrow. But what can the atheist say about this situation? The atheist doesn't believe that that little girl is in heaven, nor that she received any kind of personal justice. To paraphrase astronomer Carl Sagan, when the non-believer looks at the billions of galaxies scattered across the night sky, we recognize that in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. So what answer does the atheist have? How about this? When a child suffers so horrendously, we are utterly outraged and have a burning desire to fix the situation so that this event cannot happen again. Hope is valuable here and now because we have no expectation for tomorrow. We take our anger of the unjust world and cultivate it into change. We have a raging fire that the religious simply do not. We realize that we hope for justice. Then, to the best of our ability, we must create it with our own hands here on earth. We realize that now is our time to shine, and that we have all of eternity to sleep when we're done. I mentioned earlier that hope is the fuel of our fires, but what's the engine of our dreams? It's reason. Reason to believe our hopes are credible. We find motivation to effect change only when we believe change is possible, and since we don't believe that justice will come from elsewhere, we strive to make it happen ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that theists don't have this drive too. They do, they absolutely do. But their fire is eclipsed by our own because they don't have our urgency. In the presence of hope in the infinite, all will come to pass. But in a universe without an afterlife, every laugh, every tear, every touch becomes more valuable. Our finite relationships, our finite experiences, our finite struggles, our finite triumphs become infinitely more valuable. If this is the only existence we have, if this is our one opportunity to love, to learn, to experience, doesn't that infuse our lives with an urgency and richness that the promise of an eternity simply cannot match? As an atheist, as a naturalist, as the Forsaken, I offer you not the hope of eternal life, but the certainty of this life. I offer you the challenge to make the most out of your brief time in the sun, to create your own meaning, to forge your own path, to cherish the here and now, to leave this world a better place for its own sake, not for your sake. Yes, the religious may have their unique hopes, but we have ours too. We have the hope of a life lived fully, a world understood more deeply, a love experienced more intensely, because we believe this is our only chance. We have the hope of making this one life that we know we have as beautiful, as meaningful, and as fulfilling as it can possibly be, not just for ourselves, but for those that will come to stand on our shoulders. We burn the fuel of our lives for a sunrise that we will never see. That is our sacrifice. That is our legacy. That is our hope. And do you know what? It's enough. It is enough. I'll end with this. Having hope in something with a high probability of coming true is reasonable. Having hope in something with roughly a 50% chance of being true is where hope is at its best. But having hope in something with a very low probability of being true, perhaps even no probability of being true, is faith. Hence, the question asked of me, an atheist, is to offer you faith, but I cannot, for I have none, nor would I want it. I've made peace with my eventual demise, and as I grow older, and dare I say wiser, I find the notion of living forever all the more dire. I don't want it, and I despise once being assured by my parents and teachers that I do. But if you insist on such hope, and I get it, then how about this? If there exists an all-powerful, all-loving God, do you really think that he will judge you based on whether or not you can convince yourself of the many miracle claims in the Bible? Really? If a good atheist and a bad Christian go to the pearly gates, would God, being benevolent, judge them on whether or not they believed Moses split the sea? I don't think so. Such a claim, I'd say, is an insult to anything that you can describe as good. It turns out, then, that I can actually offer you the same hope as the Christian. But unlike the Christian, I'm not going to demand that you live your life on my terms, all while saying that my terms are actually God's. No. I say that you should live the one and only life you're guaranteed to have on your terms. Be true to yourself, and don't let those that call themselves pious tell you that you have no hope unless you believe like them. Thank you for your time. I mean it when I say that I deeply appreciate this opportunity, and I'm happy to hear any and all questions. Well, within reason, I'm sure he'll control that. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.